Lighthouse Jive, written by Jonathan Dunne, narrated for you by the author. Dedication to Erin. Looking forward to meeting you in December 2016. I've been working around the clock to get this book finished before your arrival. Death is nature's remedy for all things. Charles Dickens, A Tale of Two Cities. Acknowledgements. Thanks to the proofreaders who braved the elements on this project. Author's note. If there is anyone here who has an objection to this marriage, then speak now or forever hold your peace. Yes, I have an objection. You, sir, why do you object to this sacred holy matrimony? Because they're hippos. Doesn't anybody see that? Dear reader, the above passage is a dialogue of a dream I had the very night before writing the first chapter to this novel on the 26th of July 2016, in a house overlooking the loch in the picturesque village of Killaloe in County Clare, Ireland. Across from the loch is a green wooded hill. Every morning a mist would come down that hill. It inspired the natural remoteness of Lighthouse Jive. I think this dream dialogue encapsulates the absurdity of life. I think it does Lighthouse Jive justice. Jonathan Dunne, 15th of September 2016. 1. Traffic jam. Lambert was sitting in a traffic jam in the sprawling hearse he had been recently left in his father's will. The Reflections, I Really Must Know, was pumping out of his CD player, and he was just about floating above the madness of Wednesday evening's bank holiday rush hour mayhem. July was just around the corner, and people were all scattergun in anticipation of their summer holidays. Everybody was in a rush to get home and pack to forget. Lambert included himself in this foray. After the day he had, who'd blame him? Although he was seriously beginning to regret not bothering to book a holiday. He would end up doing chores around the house in Oldcastle, as he had done last year and the year before. The traffic had ground to a standstill. Lambert craned his neck to see what the hold-up was ahead. Sirens began to seep into earshot, but nothing was visible except for the line of idling traffic polluting what fresh air was left in the city. And now the fully qualified morons of this metropolis had started to angrily blow on their horns, magic horns that could mysteriously levitate the stagnant bottleneck of vehicles as Moses had parted the Red Sea. Imbeciles. Everywhere, muttered Lambert, raising the volume on the Reflections to compensate for the high moronic level in this city. He had downloaded the Jive music playlist from the internet and recorded it on a continuous hourly loop, fearful should the tune stop and the truth of the situation set in, i.e. reality becoming the next track. The reality of the situation was that Lambert worked on the front line of the country's largest phone company in the claims department. To make it even sweeter, Lambert couldn't think of a more thankless job. He had been verbally abused 8 times already today, that's once an hour, on the hour, and verbally raped during his 1 hour of overtime by a distraught individual on the phone who seemed far too interested in the subject of finger-banging. Lambert hadn't heard the colourful expression until today. The irate caller had accused Lambert of doing nothing but finger-banging at his desk all day rather than solving customer problems. Nothing like a good old finger-banging to finish a day's work, thought Lambert, checking in the sun visor mirror to see that his eyebrows weren't meeting in the middle. Amber warned him regularly to keep them in check if he didn't want to look like a disturbed individual with a unibrow. The blare of car horns was becoming so loud now that Lambert was beginning to hear them over the Reflections, which was a travesty. So he raised the volume yet again on this sunny Wednesday afternoon. He closed his eyes and hummed along to placate himself, almost fearful of opening his lids and unleashing the impending chaos in real time. However, being of a curious nature, he opened his eyes a little and glanced in his rear view at the driver behind him. There was a flustered woman back there with 2 young kids in the back seat. She looked as if she was about to switch off the engine and walk home, leaving the kids strapped in the back, but making sure to let down the windows a fraction for the panting poodles. Lambert gazed left and right. Every driver on Limerick City's O'Connell Street looked to be on the verge of a mental breakdown before they could make it home. "Oh, Jesus," sighed Lambert as he muttered, "Here we go." The dregs of society came slinking, stooping and dragging themselves from the city's cracks and tapping on car windows for loose change. Lambert witnessed one young woman with a bleached, scraggly head of hair approach a windscreen with a bucket of suds and a window-cleaning blade. She said something to the driver, who whirred up his window in her face as she spoke. The reflection's heavenly notes muted her voice, but Lambert saw her lips move and briefly wondered what she was saying. Lambert then saw the suit-and-tie driver curtly shake a finger to tell her that his Jaguar didn't need a window clean, but she went ahead anyway, because she had nothing to lose in life. She started to work on the insects stuck to his glass while directing her urchin son to other cars, armed with a rag and a litre bottle of soapy water. Not getting the message, the driver twisted a lever and kindly sent a double jet of radioactive green wiper fluid up both of the beggar's nostrils. Compliments of the Jag, piercing the brain and stunning her momentarily. She swiveled around a few times, right there on O'Connell Street for all to see, before shaking her head as a wet dog would, and moved on to the next parked car for 10 cents. She was no stranger to wiper fluid, thought Lambert, tapping out rhythms on his steering wheel. She's got no dignity left, thought Lambert. Not that she had much to begin with. Lambert didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so decided to huff a melancholic chuckle for humanity's sake and raised the volume until he was in danger of bursting his eardrums. Anything to drown out what he was seeing on O'Connell Street this afternoon. Anybody would think that growing up in the funeral business would have toughened him up, desensitized him. But the years of being surrounded by death had sunk into his pores. This is what made it worse. His father's old business had always dealt with corpses, and dead is dead. There's no hope for a cadaver. But those beggars on O'Connell Street were very much alive, and being treated as the corpses they had already become in life. That is what saddened Lambert. Where has mankind gone wrong? Lambert wondered. Where does the kind part fit into this? As far as he was concerned, mankind needed one big mother of all parties to get to know each other and realize that everybody is in the same boat, an expression Lambert would come to fear. So why not rock that boat with some serious jive music, creating harmony among men? Again, Lambert was none the wiser that his prophetic words would touch the lives of hundreds in just a week from now. He quickly sobered up when a rag slapped across his windscreen. The urchin had singled him out in the pile-up. Lambert discreetly pressed the central locking button and cringed a little as all doors clearly locked, making him feel really small, considering there was a kid barely head height at his window. The child spoke anyway, as the kid was on begging autopilot. "My name is Len," which immediately told Lambert that Len was also a person with a name just like him, instantly making a soulful connection. Interesting tactic, thought Lambert. "Do you have a dead body in there, sir?" The kid started to work. Lambert considered the day he had had and the general state of play. "Only humanity, Len." Len obviously wasn't a misanthrope if his blank expression was anything to go by. Lambert didn't have the heart to tell Len to sling his hook, even though the kid was leaving grubby streaks across his windshield. The inside of the hearse needed a clean, though. Aristotle's hairs were all over the seats, just as well that the hearse was decommissioned from funeral service. Lambert stared into the kid's eyes on the other side of the glass. Those dark eyes were void of any feeling as he proceeded to work a window blade up and down the hearse's windshield, obviously not getting the idea that the blade needed to be used only in downward strokes. The child was building up a right mess, but his redundant face on the other side of Lambert's glass was mesmerizing. Lambert saw how humans had failed in that little bronzed, grimy, freckled face. The kid finished his so-called cleaning. Lambert slipped the 50 cents he used for the shopping trolley through his window. The beggar child gave a respectful nod to Lambert as an adult would, and not the light-up reaction of a kid being given money to buy sweets. Lambert watched as the kid moved back a car to the woman on the edge of a breakdown, regretful that he hadn't given him something else instead of money, like the bargain basement tatty copy of Oliver Twist on the back seat, for example. "Wrong move," Lambert said to himself as he watched Len introduce himself to the crazy lady in the car behind him. Lambert saw her momentarily meet the child's eyes to tell him that she would rather not have a dirty rag dragged across her windshield, thank you very much, but the vagabond child paid no heed as his mother had instructed him to do. The woman got out of her car, grabbed the boys' tools of the trade and launched them across the street, screaming something at the kid who just stood there with his arms down by his sides, as if being scolded by his mother. Lambert couldn't hear what she said because he had just risen, "I really must know," to the point of distortion. He closed his eyes and prayed for humanity. What would the Greek gods say of this mess we have created? Lambert always pondered what they might think from the comfort of his hearse. He had an affinity for the Greek gods and had showed his appreciation by naming his 2 children, twin boy and girl, after a Greek god and goddess. Apollo and Artemis turned out okay. Well, at least Artemis seemed to be on the right path. Unintelligible, mysterious, hysterical, and cranky as any 18-year-old girl. Not Apollo, however. No, Apollo was different. Lambert had even christened the dog after Aristotle, even though he was a Scottish terrier. Lambert's phone rang and destroyed the orchestral buzz he had going in the funeral car.
"Theo, where are you? What's that racket? Have you heard the news?"
That line gave Lambert the heebie-jeebies, and he answered in single sound bites as he was prone to when he just wanted to get to the point. "The reflections. Traffic jam. Beggars."
Uh-huh.
"What news, Amber?" Lambert switched off the CD player. It had been good while it lasted, and listened in to the 5 o'clock news just in time to hear about 3 different terrorist attacks across France and Germany. His heart began to race, feeling the pressure of disgraced mankind come toppling down on top of him. Right there and then, he decided that he needed to simplify his life and concentrate on what he held dear: Amber, Apollo, Artemis, and even Aristotle. He needed a colonic irrigation of the mind and soul, and that would begin by never again listening to the news, or watching it for that matter. There would always be bad news, if he turned it on or not. Who needed that? Lambert would exist in his own happy, oblivious bubble from here on in. What happened outside his gate would be irrelevant. But this was just the beginning for Lambert. He still hadn't finished his phone conversation. "What's wrong? Have you ever heard the expression finger bang?"
"I can't believe you haven't heard the news."
"What news? The terrorists?" Lambert looked around as if that news would reveal itself on O'Connell Street. "Just spit it out, woman."
"There's an asteroid, Theo."
Cue eye roll on Lambert's behalf. "Here we go again."
"Again? A 6-mile wide asteroid, Theodore. The last time a 6-mile wide asteroid hit Earth, it wiped out the fucking dinosaurs. T-Rex, remember him?"
"Great music."
"Puff, gone up in smoke. Only technically, it'll probably be a tsunami. It's always a tsunami,"
she added for effect. "I fail to see what any of this has got to do with here and now. I've got enough on my plate. You know, I was accused of
Theo, it's going to smash into Earth. You can't get more here and now than that. NASA has just published it in its news bulletin. There are people selling plots of the moon on eBay and...
"Don't buy one, Amber. It's got to be a scam."
"Oh, I hate it when you don't take me seriously, Theo."
"Amber, please, enough conspiracy theories."
"Jesus, Theo, this is no fucking conspiracy theory. An asteroid the size of Liechtenstein is going to impact."
"Where?"
"Liechtenstein."
"Never heard of it. Is it big?" Lambert looked over his right shoulder to see Len pick up his rag and half-empty bottle of suds from the pavement. No kid on this planet should have to go through that. He shook his head in shame.
"Big enough to wipe out mankind?"
For a very brief moment, Lambert felt that this wasn't such a bad idea. Wipe us all out and start fresh, because that was the problem as far as Lambert was concerned. There were too many people in the world, and they had become a homogeneous product. They had lost their identity and compassion somewhere along the way, and were no longer valued. No longer people. "Amber, we'll all be dead and gone by the time any asteroid hits Earth."
"We'll all be dead and gone when it hits Utah."
Lambert felt a panic attack coming on. "Where?"
"That's in the USA. Jesus, Theo, didn't you ever open a geography book at school? NASA has the GPS coordinates for its trajectory, and that's where it's going to impact."
Lambert was taking all of this with a pinch of salt, and mimed said pinch of salt by picking up an imaginary salt shaker and lightly sprinkling his dashboard with invisible salt.
"There will be nowhere to hide."
"Not even under the bed?"
"Theo, that 6-mile wide asteroid is going to cause a tsunami that will drown half of the planet."
"Do you have to be such a pessimist?"
"I think we need a holiday, Theo. Let's go to the coast."
"How can you talk about going to the beach when terrorists and asteroids are at large?"
I need a break.
And that seemed to sum it all up right there. I agree. Let's go to the coast. We can get away from it all. Amber answered with a certain sense of urgency.
I'll go pack right now.
As she hung up, the traffic began to crawl again. Just a few minutes ahead, Lambert discovered the cause of the pileup. Some of the city's scumbags had decided to drive a stolen car through the revolving doors of the Bank of Ireland because they'd been charged interest instead of accumulating it. Lambert didn't care anymore, nor would anybody care by the time those scumbags filtered through the justice system, because there will be no bank after the asteroid hits. There will be no justice system. But maybe the revolving door will be left standing in the middle of a 32-mile-wide crater, still revolving on rusty bearings in a caustic Martian wind. Lambert shook his head and chuckled to himself at this. Not a month went by when Amber didn't come up with her own conspiracy theory on how things really went down. She had a very interesting theory about 9/11, but too crazy to repeat in public. She had another explanation for the Loch Ness Monster, but again, she should have kept it to herself, as she should have kept the end of the world to herself. They say opposites attract. Amber fears what'll never happen, but Lambert fears what is happening. A good holiday would put all their fears to bed and restore their hope and faith in humanity. Halfway home, Lambert switched on the radio, only to have the 6 o'clock news catch him by surprise. During the last hour, there had been more coordinated terrorist attacks in London and Copenhagen. From that golden nugget, the newsreader went on to read with equal monotonal exuberance about a top politician involved in money laundering, more cases of Zika babies in Brazil, and a cannabis plantation worth more money than Lambert would ever see in his lifetime. Maybe the world should be smoking cannabis, Lambert muttered to himself. It's a fucking plant that grows out of the ground. Chill, people. In anger, Lambert switched off the news and vowed for the second time today never to listen to the news or watch it ever again. The news had brought them nothing but worry. Lambert was genuinely worried, not for the end of the world, but for the end of Amber's world. The apocalypse was becoming her obsession. On the drive home, he decided what he needed was a hobby that would fulfill him, food for his mournful soul. Lambert was tired of being a robot. He thought on it for a moment, something that would awaken his senses and make him feel like a human again. When was the last time he had really felt alive, and not that drone he'd become? When was the last time he had laughed and giggled and felt the nervous flutter of pure energy inside him? Sadly, Lambert couldn't recall when he had last felt alive. The only emotion he felt these days was anger at the morons in the other end of the line in the claims department. Yes, the anger flared and told him that he was alive, but Lambert needed to lean more towards happy, happy, shiny, shiny. Maybe this impromptu holiday might just be the answer to give him the inspiration he needed. A sequence of events had just been set in motion, and Lambert was about to get a whole pile of inspiration. 2. Going on holiday. Half an hour later, Lambert steered the old hearse into the front yard of their pebble-dash semi-detached on the outskirts of Oldcastle. Aristotle came skipping down the driveway to greet him and proceeded to jump all over him, yapping incessantly in his face until he picked him up and gave him a kiss and dropped him back onto the tarmac. Lambert had always thought that little dogs are like little children looking for attention and to be picked up. It had been the same thing for almost 10 years. Aristotle had become their third child somewhere along the way. In the hallway, Lambert met his teenage daughter, Artemis, slouched on the ground, her knees protruding through the cuts in her jeans, pulled up to her chest, with a long and sorrowful face. She was doing that thing with her hair, hiding her face again, covering herself in her security blanket. She was playing with her Nintendo. "Oh boy," was all Lambert said, making it sound a lot like, "Here we go again." "What's wrong, Artie?" in more of a tone that said, "What's wrong this time, Artie?" How many more teenage years are there? She's 18 now, so that makes 2 years. 2 years, that's a lot of long faces. Or is 20 not included? 1 year sounds better. "Artemis, what's the problem this time?" Lambert's question was met with a scowl and a huff, and he stepped back immediately as if he had just seen a biohazard sign he had learned long ago. "Where's your brother?" Artemis didn't look up from her screen. "Where do you think he is?" "In his bedroom." Artemis dragged her eyes from her Nintendo and gave him a sarcastic double thumbs up and a false grin between hair strands. And your mother? Why do you ask the same question every fucking day? What's your language? Fuck is a word in the dictionary. Where was I? Oh, this is a semi-detached house. It's not a maze at the Overlook Hotel. Being an avid horror fan, everything came down to a spooky book or film for Artemis. Just call out or stick your head around the corner. It's no mystery, Dad. Hey, show little respect for your old man. Lambert resorted to the same old back answer when he had no other ideas. Who paid for that Nintendo 3DS? Who made you? She looked at him with raised eyebrows. Who refused to buy the simple Nintendo and pay double for the 3DS? More raised eyebrows. If Aristotle... Dad, Aristotle is a Scottish terrier. I'm talking about the Greek god. If he... Don't go there. You don't know what Aristotle would say about my Nintendo, so let's just leave it there. He'd probably want to have a go on it. Lambert climbed the stairs and went to knock on Apollo's door when he heard his son's voice. He paused, just as he was about to knock. From inside his bedroom, he heard his son doing his cattle market auctioneer breakneck spiel routine.
And up next, folks, we've got this sexy little Polly heifer. Let's start the bidding at 200, 222, 300, 333, 350, 50, 50, 50. Gone to the man with the head.
Lambert let the knock slide as he heard a makeshift hammer slam on Apollo's desk. He walked away. His son's head was in the clouds, but at least he was happy, and that's the main thing. Apollo had expressed his interest in taking up auctioneering as a career, but he concentrated on the fun side of things, like the crazy way auctioneers speak at auctions. An auctioneer needs to study, and Apollo was averse to turning pages. This week it was an auctioneer. What'll it be next week? He needs to make some friends, thought Lambert. And better yet, find a girlfriend. The closest Apollo had ever come to expressing an interest in the opposite sex was the door signs of public bathrooms. It was a worry for Lambert, but better late than never. Lambert had never said it aloud, but he often pondered if Apollo's twin sister Artemis had sucked a lot from her brother when they were in the womb. Artemis, when she was sulking, could hold a debate about paint, but Apollo always seemed to speak from somebody else's point of view, and in their voice. Like now, it was that frantic auctioneer. The kid didn't seem to have his own opinion on anything, unless it's a sexy Polly heifer. Then again, that's his auctioneer's opinion, not his own. He needed to start thinking about his prospects. He's living in cloud cuckoo land. Lambert had advised him to write a book a few weeks back, anything that might make him money in the future, because he wasn't cut out for a civil servant position. He would start imitating himself eventually. Lambert quickened pace towards the bedroom where Amber was frantically packing clothes into suitcases laid on the bed. She was a hot mess, and for all the wrong reasons. She looked at him with a crazed glint in her eye as she grabbed whatever her hands found in the wardrobe and pulled them out, still on their hangers, and lobbed them into the suitcases. "Oh, good, you're home," she said, trying to appear nonchalant about the whole thing. "What's wrong with Artie?" Handbrake broke up with her again. She gets too attached. You'd think she would have learned that the first time they broke up. Yes, but she broke up with him this time. Hopefully she'll stay strong and leave him in the jungle where she found him. Amber agreed wholeheartedly. Lambert and his wife had already decided that Handbrake reminded them of George of the Jungle, built like a brick shithouse, but unlike George, was incoherent at the best of times. "I'm sure that he was challenged," Amber suggested, "before he took up boxing. He wasn't mentally able to keep up with her. I think that's why he dumped her." "I thought you said she dumped him." "Oh, yeah, you're right. But you know what's worse than Handbrake? I didn't think it existed. I just received a call from Alison's mom. Artie's friend, Alison." "Ex-friend," Amber confirmed. "Why?" "Because her birthday party was today, and Artie was on the invitation list, but she was feeling a little sensitive after dumping Featherbrain and couldn't face the people. She didn't turn up to a birthday party. Big deal." "It is a big deal. Alison's mom just sent me a text telling me that I would be billed for the no-show." Lambert didn't know how to respond, just stared at his wife. Eventually he found his tongue. "So this is what mankind has come down to. What sad little people. She'll be waiting for her money." Lambert had been observing his wife's smash-and-grab approach to holiday packing, and he didn't like what he was seeing. "Yeah, I think we all need a relaxing holiday." Amber nodded. I think you're right. We should have booked something long before now. The chores and repairs can wait for another day. Taking his line of thought a little further, maybe, we'll never have to fix the gutters, seeing as... Theo, stop using the end of the world to get out of doing the house chores. It's a good excuse, Lambert smiled. You have to admit that much. I know you're taking the piss, but there really is an asteroid. It is up there, and we're in its flight path. Do you think Mother Earth's force field will burn that shooting star up before it gets into our atmosphere? No, sir, she spoke, but didn't stop jamming clothes into the suitcases. We're all dinosaurs. Ironic. She looked up at him with a strained smile. You do know that Nostradamus predicted this. Then Amber started to pack away personal belongings in the pockets of the suitcases, the inheritance of jewellery her mother had given her, and other miscellaneous items. Lambert found some consolation in that. Nice to think that Amber planned to dress up for their holidays, have dinner out in the evenings, and doll up. But then Lambert's smile faded as his wife proceeded to pack her antique French jewellery box that was at least as big as Aristotle and weighed double. The more Lambert surveyed her packing, the faster he drew the conclusion that she was packing as if there was a fire in the house, and she was salvaging her dear and precious things. She was clearly packing for the end of the world. She even packed her paints, canvas, and easel. She hadn't painted anything since before she got pregnant with the twins. Unable to take any more nonsense, Lambert intervened. He held her by the arm and sat her down on the bed. He looked into her eyes. Let's go and enjoy ourselves. Let's switch off from the world and be free. Let's not listen or watch the news. People took LSD in the 60s to make the world a crazy place. Now people take Prozac to make the world a normal place. See what I'm saying? Not really. Now that Lambert thought about it, he also didn't have the foggiest idea, but he knew he had a point in there somewhere. Maybe it was that they were a product of their time, but he'd need to think that out a little longer. We all need a holiday for our own reasons. We've gotten tied up in this daily lunacy and forgotten who we are. We need to get in touch with our souls again. You were happy when you used to do that transcendental meditation? That's the one. It became your hobby, remember? You loved it. It fed your soul. You were happy all the time. Nobody's happy all the time unless they're on drugs, legal or illegal. Amber thought about this. She nodded. I was relaxed and happier. The way she said it told Lambert that she had forgotten about her old happy self. Promise me you'll stop being moderator at the message boards. Those conspiracy websites are going to drive you nuts. She didn't shoot him down, which was promising. But she didn't promise anything either. The only one who doesn't need a holiday is Apollo. Lambert smiled as he reflected on his wife's comment. It's true. That kid would be happy anywhere. He's odd, but he's happy. He laughed. Even Aristotle needs a holiday, so maybe he's got something after all. Amber panicked. I forgot about the dog. Don't worry, we'll find a place that caters for pets. Couldn't we just ask Phoebe to feed him while we're gone? She owes us a favour. A darkness came over Amber's appearance. No, let's bring him. As she said this, she reached and opened her bedside locker. From it, she took a Bible and packed that into the suitcase too. Amber wasn't even a religious woman, for Christ's sake. A Bible? Are you expecting to find vampires at the end of the world? Lambert deflated again after the brief moment of light he'd seen in his wife's face. It had taken 20 years off her, but that apocalyptic cloud had set in again when Amber had mentioned the neighbour. That is, the real world, or rather, the end of the real world. Do you want to put Aristotle in that suitcase too? She studied him, but didn't answer. They both knew she would, if there was space, but she'd already packed her life into those suitcases. They had their insecurities in life, but they were a good team and had 2 decades of history together to fall back on. They were best friends and occasional lovers. The only regret Amber had in marrying Lambert was that her name sounded a little comical. Amber Lambert. That and naming her twins after Greek gods. Do the kids know? Amber answered. No, I'll go tell them. Amber took herself to Artemis's bedroom and started packing clothes away, and the porcelain doll Artemis had been given by her deceased grandmother, Amber's mother. Lambert decided to overlook it. From here on in, Lambert was going to overlook everything, as opposed to overseeing everything. He needed to get back in touch with his inner self, and stress and worry clouded that. He needed to simplify his life. Amber would teach herself not to believe everything in the news. Then Lambert moved on to Apollo's bedroom, knocking first. From inside, Lambert heard the auctioneer's hammer slam down.
Who is it?
Apollo asked in the auctioneer's voice. He stayed in character. Lambert would give him that much. It's me.
I'm practicing.
Practicing for what? Lambert pondered. He opened the door. We're going on... What's that? What? Asked Apollo. That eye patch. Why are you asking me what it is if you know what it is? Where did you get it? eBay. Lambert couldn't compute what his son was telling him, gawping at the white eye patch over his right eye socket with a bright red cross on it. But you have a glass eye, Apollo. Lambert sharpened his words. An expensive glass eye. Where is it? I lost it. You lost your eye? Apollo nodded as if losing your eye was the most normal thing in the world. How? I misplaced it. You lost it. Lambert took a deep breath and tried to summon up some zen, but wasn't finding any. Serves you right. They both knew what he was referring to. He and Amber had grown very weary of Apollo's juvenile trickery with his glass eye, taking it out for strangers and using it as his party piece. He'd once slipped it into his cousin's marble bag, and they'd been playing with his glass eye for an hour before anybody copped it and screamed. At least get a black eye patch. I'm no pirate. Besides, this eye patch is cool. Your eye will turn up. Anyway, we're going on holiday. Pack your things. Apollo answered back as the auctioneer in quick-fire musical high-low fashion. Where we going? Going. Wanting to add, this could get very annoying very fast, Lambert answered, to the coast. Gone to the man with the receding hairline. Apollo slammed his makeshift hammer, the sole of his Converse runner, on his desk. Thank you, sir. You can fill in the paperwork with Leanne on your way out. Toodle pip. Lambert wasn't sure how to react, so tried to feign a smile for his son's benefit, but he did worry about his child's future. Somehow he had thought that by naming his son Apollo he would have summoned up the power of the Greek god himself and instilled it in his son. He looked at him once more with his tatty grey Converse in his hand and the red cross patch, then gently eased his door closed. Downstairs Artemis was still on the floor, engrossed in Mario Kart. Lambert approached his daughter with caution, but she exploded when he mentioned an impromptu break. Fancy a holiday? She looked up at him momentarily. Yeah, sure. No, I'm serious. Right now. All of us just go. Leave all this craziness behind and switch off for a few days. In just a few days from now, Lambert would regret ever mentioning switch off. Artemis switched off her Nintendo, which meant something. She sat up. Are you being serious right now? This isn't just a mind map thing where we travel in our minds, like that time when you... I'm going to book a caravan on the coast, overlooking the Atlantic in some secluded spot. Is that another way of saying where there's nothing to do? Artemis wasn't sure if she loved or hated this idea. Then she thought about Handbrake down the street. I'm in. Absence makes the heart grow fonder. Asked Lambert. Nothing. There's one catch. Here we go. No electronics, no phones. This is our detox, me-time holiday. This is our collective colonic irrigation. Getting rid of shit we don't need in our lives. Artemis smiled contentedly. I already did some of that today. Lambert was impressed with his daughter's witty metaphor. You're not just a pretty face. At least someone was on the righteous path that a certain Greek goddess laid many years before. Artemis smiled up at him, and it lifted Lambert's heart to see her smile. This detox holiday was already working. Thinking that the encounter with his daughter had gone far too smoothly, he left and rang the caravan agency. He booked a sizable caravan for the fortnight at a ridiculously low price. The caravan agency practically paid him over the phone to stay in that particular caravan. He then proceeded to round up the several suitcases, drag them down the stairs and out into the spacious boot of the hearse. He had converted it by dropping the floor where the coffin would rest and had 2 seats installed for Apollo and Artemis. Amber followed close behind, trying to hurry proceedings along with a great sense of urgency, calling for Artemis and Apollo to get their arses in gear. Anybody would think they were trying to escape the apocalypse the way she was carrying on and not going on a relaxing holiday by the coast. A coast that was supposedly about to be swallowed in a tsunami. 20 minutes later, as dusk approached, the Lamberts' hearse headed southwest from the old castle to County Kerry. Apollo and Artemis sat in their customised bucket seats, while Aristotle sat atop the mountain of luggage, taking in everything from his vantage point. As they moved out into the countryside, the roads became narrower, and the hedges got higher. Passers-by blessed themselves as the hearse zoomed by. The Lamberts had gotten used to feeling what the Messiah had probably felt, as people blessed themselves in his presence. But now Lambert couldn't help the feeling that people were blessing themselves because the Lamberts were driving into the apocalypse in a death car, in one final desperate effort to rekindle humanity. Or maybe they were just going to the beach in a hearse. Soon they were driving along the winding coast road with a sheer drop to the Atlantic below. Woolly sheep and stone walls were all that existed down here. Maybe this place will weave its enchanted spell and help them forget the chaos of the modern world. "If there's magic anywhere in the world, it is here," opined Lambert. Amber glanced at him, then looked into his eyes, which was something she hadn't done in quite some time. The stolen glance had only lasted a millisecond, but it had been years since Lambert had seen that same sublime look. Daily life had caused them to drift apart, even though they were living under the same roof. But these days, they seemed to be housemates and nothing more. "It's supposed to be around here," said Lambert, squinting out into the night in the hopes of finding the caravan site. The hearse didn't have a GPS, as it was guided by the light of God, and it was normally a one-way ticket to the cemetery. Amber used her iPhone's GPS to scout out the caravan park, but not even Google could tell them where they were. "I think we might have entered some kind of vortex," said Amber. Lambert back answered, "Don't start." "I was only joking," Amber answered. "There it is!" screamed Artemis. "Jesus, what?" retorted Lambert, jerking on the steering wheel. Amber yelled simultaneously, Where is it?" "I saw the sign for the caravan park, up here to the left." "Okay, Artie, okay." Lambert looked across at his wife. "You thought she was talking about the asteroid, didn't you?" Amber just sniffed a little, something she did when she knew she was wrong or when her husband was right. 3. A dwarf dances the conga. Night had fallen by the time the Lamberts arrived at their destination point in County Kerry. Followed the numbered caravans until they got to theirs at the end of the line. Lambert parked up the hearse in front of the coffee and cream-coloured caravan. "We're staying in that?" Lambert's tranquility was quickly shot to pieces. "Yes, Artie, what's your problem now?" He began to clutch the steering wheel. "Unless you want to sleep in the hearse." "Look at it," Artemis back answered. "The only family that can stay in that is a family of mice." "I'm going to dismiss you now, as you're given to bouts of melodrama," said Lambert in a matter-of-fact tone. "Everything is fold up, fold down in the caravan. There will be plenty of room once everything is folded up. And at night we fold everything down. Or the other way around." "Are you sure we can't fold down the caravan to make it any bigger?" Apollo chuckled at this juncture while his sister added, "I need my privacy." "Don't judge it till you've seen inside." Lambert gave the caravan keys to Artemis, who huffed in response. They were in the middle of nowhere, just as Lambert had wanted, and the Atlantic Ocean was right in front of them. It was too dark and foggy to see anything, but Lambert could sense its salty presence and could hear the waves smashing off the rocks somewhere down below in the distance, as well as the intermittent bleat of sheep somewhere high on Carrantoohill Mountain. An immense flat darkness was all that could be seen of the Atlantic. The sea breeze rolling in off the ocean blew in Lambert's face and filled his lungs. It practically levitated him off the ground. He was so high on life for the first time in far, far too long. Years, in fact. How had he let that happen? Because he'd been busy raising his kids and solving ungrateful strangers' phone and internet bills. He'd forgotten about the finer things in life. He was too busy finger-banging. Artemis protested from inside the caravan. "Told you, Daddy Mouse." "It's just more open plan than you're used to," offered Amber, though her face changed when she actually stepped into the miniature space. Amber looked out at her husband with that "she's got a point" look. "It just means we'll be closer." Lambert tried to smile. "Too close for comfort," quipped Artemis, and quickly stepped out of the caravan again. Amber and Lambert followed, also sensing the claustrophobia. "Guys, they practically paid me to book it," Artemis added. "Oh God, I wonder why." Lambert walked into that one. "Look, they told me it was a sizable caravan over the phone." "What does sizable even mean, Theo? It's a little abstract for my liking. You should have asked for a picture or dimensions or something," said Amber. Lambert decided to nip this in the bud right now. "Shh, Listen to that. What? Asked Amber, looking around her. I hear nothing. Exactly. Amber gave him a playful slap on the shoulder. Will you stop doing that? Lambert turned to Amber and swallowed her in an impromptu hug. She gazed into his eyes. I feel like I'm standing at the end of the world, she breathed in his ear. The salty wind blew Amber's blonde locks and made her look young again, rejuvenated. And if this is the end of the world, surely this will be the last place on earth that the apocalypse will reach. Lambert's happy buzz fizzled a little. Forget about all that nonsense now. Amber's eyes flashed. You know I hate that word, Theo. Feel that? Asked Lambert. What? The sea breeze blowing away those conspiracy theory cobwebs. She chuckled. Within minutes, Artemis was running around in circles with Aristotle. She looked 10 years old again, and the Scottish terrier was yelping excitedly like a puppy. She's happy to be free of George of the Jungle, muttered Amber. Look how free she is. Lambert nodded. So far, everything was working out. Except for the snug caravan. Apollo was sitting on the bonnet of the hearse, looking out to sea in quiet reflection. Lambert followed his line of vision from the good eye. It was useless following his glass eye because it always stared forward. Lambert clocked the eye patch and didn't even bother to ask if he'd found his eye. To his surprise, he saw what his son was so interested in, a revolving light on the horizon. From here it looked as if that light was suspended in the air above the freezing, choppy Atlantic waters, like some kind of spacecraft hovering over the sea. It entranced Lambert, drew him down towards the cliff edge. Of course it wasn't a spaceship, but better not to ask Amber her opinion. No, this was a lighthouse. And now Lambert could see the vague form of a small island just off the headland, outlined by the effervescent, luminous waves bubbling on this side of the island's silhouette. Just then, Lambert wished he could be there, over on that island, cut off from the dangers of the world. It would be perfect. But for now, this caravan site was the next best thing. There had always been something about a lighthouse for Lambert. It represented so many things. Tonight it's a beacon of light and hope. That warning light wasn't warning wandering sea vessels away. No, tonight that revolving light was warding off the bad news of the world. Terrorists, corrupt politicians, conspiracy theories, traffic jams, out-of-control asteroids, Jaguar's windscreen wiper fluid, the madness that is 2016. The lighthouse was telling all that negativity to keep right the fuck away from Lambert and his family for at least a fortnight while they're on holiday, please. Lambert could hardly wait for tomorrow morning to see what that lighthouse and the island looked like in daylight. He grabbed the luggage from the hearse and took them inside, where Amber insisted on putting away everything neatly in the tiny fold-up bedrooms with a new sense of purpose. Half an hour later, they were all sitting around the fold-up table in the kitchenette staring at each other, twiddling their thumbs. Lambert still hadn't gotten used to Apollo's Red Cross eye patch. And now what? Asked Artemis. I'm not used to sitting at a table with my family. It was true that they never sat down for lunch or dinner together because everybody had their own schedule. The odd weekend, Amber and Lambert would attempt to get everybody together to sit down and simply talk, but the telly always got in the way. If it wasn't the goggle box, it was a Nintendo, and if it wasn't the Nintendo, it was the iPad. These 5 minutes sitting at this table, listening to the rush of the nearby waves, seemed to go on for a lifetime. Now Lambert was almost relieved that everybody ate at their own time, because his little house on the prairie vision of mealtimes was just as much fantasy as the little house on the prairie was. Anybody fancy going to the local pub for refreshments? He asked, checking his watch. The village of Ballyferreter is just up the road. Amber was immediately up for the idea. Anything to keep her gaze away from the Bible in the bedroom next door. She'd been watching it from her vantage point on the table. We're in the middle of nowhere, Dad, Artemis commented. The pub will be #Deadsville. Let's go and see, said Amber. You might be surprised. Artemis yawned a little too dramatically. I want to stay here. I'm tired after the long journey. Lambert and his wife glanced at each other. This was very un-Artemis-like. "Aw, come on," said Lambert. "I'll treat you to whatever you want." "Okay then, I want a vodka and Red Bull." Lambert tried to read his wife's face before answering. He'd just seen an almost subliminal shrug, which meant that Amber was okay with it. "So let's make tonight your official first drink." "Unofficial," muttered Artemis. "Let's make it a beer shandy." That was my first drink, and I was happy to get it. But, started Artemis. Amber interrupted her daughter. Beer shandy or nothing? Anyway, said Artemis, I bet you it's a waste of time. There will be nothing but ancient ruins sitting at an old counter, supping black stuff. I bet you a pint of Guinness that you're wrong, Lambert counteracted. Apollo started up his auctioneer routine.
Moving swiftly along now to the next lot, which comes in the form of a standoff between Artemis and Theo. The pub or no pub? Let's get the bid started at €1. Euro.
Artemis sighed. I can't make up my mind if I want to go. Again the Lambert saw that yawn that was only seen when bad actors do it on the telly. Let me make up your mind for you, interjected Amber, as she got up from the table and pulled on her weather beater. She was afraid of the situation coming apart at the seams. It seemed as if this family was just dandy when going about their business, but when the family members had to sit down at a table with no diversions, they were incapable of being human. Interesting social experiment. Theo, Apollo, coming? Father and son got up from the table, leaving Artemis by herself. They left the caravan and sat into the hearse. 5 seconds later, Artemis appeared at the door of the caravan with her coat on.
Wait for me,
she beckoned.
It's creepy in the caravan.
It turned out that the village of Ballyferriter was only 5 minutes up the road and had one pub called the Central. From the street outside, it looked a little run down. But once they got inside, they discovered a state-of-the-art pub with plush velvet blue seating and rich woods. It even had a substantial dance floor, which was the first feature that caught Lambert's eye. The place had obviously been redecorated recently. The smell of paint and woodworking was still heavy on the air, and the icing on the cake? No humongous telescreen. It turned out that Artemis would be buying the first round of drinks, as the place was buzzing. Half a wedding reception had spilled over here from a country hotel up the road. Liquor and garters were flying in every direction, and the din could be heard well up the main street of the village. Even though Lambert wasn't big on crowds, the good feeling in the Central was undeniable. Amber managed to find an empty corner and rushed to it with the kids. Lambert went to the bar and waited almost 20 minutes before ordering a round of drinks from the bar staff, who were obviously under pressure, not having had the foresight to see a wedding party descend upon them. He didn't have the heart to allow Artemis to pay for the drinks with the money she'd earned doing odd jobs around the house. During those 20 minutes, Lambert saw the smallest man he had ever seen, stuck in a corner and supping on a pint of Guinness, which looked enormous in the little man's hands. He possessed one of those faces that looked too old for the rest of him. It was almost impossible to put an age on him, but Lambert was sure he was younger than he looked. It was the kind of face that stayed old until the rest of his body caught up, and he would eventually look his age when he was in his 80s. He was obviously a local here in Ballyferriter. He was talking to a young beauty behind the bar. Every time he laughed, he threw his head right back like a loon and revealed a mouth of rotten teeth. Maybe it was just the Guinness, but Lambert was almost convinced that every tooth in his head was bad. After a few pints, Lambert knew he would have nightmares about the evil imp. But it was the stature of the individual that Lambert couldn't get over. He looked like a kid sitting there on the stool, his legs dangling over the side. The tiny man caught Lambert staring at him and nodded at Lambert. Lambert nodded curtly before taking the drinks to their corner. Artemis threw her eyes skywards, as when she was given the glass of beer shandy. Apollo took his glass of Fanta graciously. Apparently he didn't drink alcohol. Amber took her glass of Heineken from Lambert. "I'd like to make a toast," said Lambert. "Then you'll need a toaster." Lambert looked to his left but couldn't pinpoint the speaker until he spotted the mischievous grin on his son's face. "So now you're a ventriloquist. This just gets better," Lambert reflected. Apollo just smiled as if he had a secret. "Anyway, I'd like to make a toast to our holiday, and to our kids who are officially adults. And let's drink to Grandad Lambert." Grandad Lambert had been a known drinker. It wasn't uncommon for him to polish off half a bottle of Jameson whiskey while embalming a corpse. He was frequently quite sozzled by the time the blush was painted on the dead's stony face. The Lamberts held up their drinks and drank. Amber downed hers in one as if she'd been waiting for this drink since she mistakenly named her children after Greek gods 18 years ago. "Would you mind ordering me another drink?" she asked. Lambert, only too happy to see his wife in such fine fettle, swiveled on his heels and headed back to the bar, whilst supping from his creamy pint of Guinness. Maybe, if he kept her liquored up long enough, the end of the world might become a distant memory. It already was. He would get her drunk till she was thinking straight. The bar was mobbed by lively wedding guests, but he spotted an opening, next to the dwarf of all places. He sidled in next to the undersized man, vaguely pondering the fact that he might think that he's trying to start up a conversation. "What can I get you?" asked the pretty brunette behind the counter. "Glass of Heineken. No, make it a pint." Lambert could feel the dwarf's eyes on him. He was unsure whether to address that searing gaze or play dumb and stare ahead of the upside-down whiskey bottles. The inverted whiskey bottles worked for approximately 10 seconds before Lambert had no choice but to look down at the tiny man and flash a brief smile. "Down from the city?" asked the small man. More or less. I work in the city, but we live in Oldcastle." The dwarf surveyed him, nodding ever so slightly, as if still deciding whether Lambert was genuine or not. He remained speechless, but took a slug on his pint of the black stuff just when Lambert thought he was about to utter something. He just caught a glimpse of that horrid mouth as he opened it to the glass. The dwarf put his pint glass on the counter again and stared at Lambert, still nodding. Lambert felt awkward and said the first thing that came to mind. "We wanted to get away from it all." "You look a little stressed out," said the dwarf finally. "You're certainly getting away from it all here, indeedy." He laughed like a hyena and threw his head back to reveal his nightmare mouth. He stretched out his little hand. "Blacktooth Joe, but you can call me Blacktooth, indeedy." Lambert observed the hard calluses of a lifetime of hard work as he took the dwarf's hand in his. Theo Lambert. He also noticed how the dwarf seemed to take pride in his nickname. He was on the verge of playing dumb once again and asking in a vague way why he was called Blacktooth Joe, but decided that it was just too bloody obvious. The dwarf's teeth and playing dumb. Obviously he prided himself on his mouth. After all, he wouldn't have introduced himself as Blacktooth Joe instead of simply Joe. Better again, the little man preferred to be called Blacktooth, which eliminated Joe right there. "I was just testing you. I know you're from Oldcastle." This shocked Lambert. Really? He'd never seen Blacktooth Joe in his life. He would have remembered such a miniature man. "I'm useless with names, but I never forget a face, especially one as stressed out as yours." This stressed out observation was beginning to tick off Lambert. "Where have we met?" "I once tried out for a circus in Oldcastle. Not because of my good looks or lack of any particular talent, but because of my size, indeedy." He turned to the barmaid. "Lacey, another pint of Guinness," looking up at Lambert. "And yourself?" "Oh, I'm fine. I might take you up on that offer later, though." "Is Lawless still back there in Oldcastle? I forget his first name." Lambert was happy to make the connection and was already putting two and two together. Now he understood the circus moment. "Oh, Arthur Lawless. Yes, he is. He's the mayor now, in fact. He's been the mayor a few years now." "Does he still have the old monkey? What was her name?" Lambert laughed at this. "Oh, Bonnie. Oh, yes, she makes all the decisions for him. We're being led by a monkey." The dwarf brayed at the moon at this juncture and gave Lambert a horrifying insight into his mouth. Lambert's father could have probably described it as the black hole of Calcutta. "I think we're all being led by monkeys, Theo. Not only Oldcastle. Did he ever get that circus off the ground?" "Not really. I think he just couldn't find the right performers." "I turned up for a casting. Indeedy. He was looking for performers and I did my routine for him, but I guess he didn't like it all that much and told me to come back when I'd perfected my act. I relied on my size too much. I thought it'd compensate for my poor clown act." He took a long gulp of the black stuff. "I thought he was bang out of order. Where's he going to find a man my size without being an official dwarf? I'm a fucking marvel to modern science, indeedy." Lambert quickly surveyed the irritated little man sitting on the stool. The girl behind the bar was making frantic clandestine signs at Lambert. For a second he thought that maybe she had something stuck in her throat, but Lambert saw that she was shaking her head in a discreet though detrimental way while eyeing the dwarf. Then she executed a very fast hand movement. It was the universal sign for drinking too much, the old open-holding, tilting hand trick. Then she lip-synced while the dwarf was staring off into space, recalling his doomed circus days. "Don't let him get started," lending Lambert the impression that he was a small man with a big attitude problem. "Speaking of monkeys," the little man started up. The girl behind the counter shook her head and threw her eyes to the heavens as if to say, "No, now you've gone and done it. He was fine and quiet all evening, a true little gentleman, but now you've opened that can of worms, you'll never get away from him now." "We got nothing but monkeys in the Parliament. That place is worse than Planet of the Apes. Nothing but monkeys squabbling and screeching between each other all day and none of them realising that there's a country to be run." Lambert looked back over his shoulder. Apollo and Artemis were playing cards. They must have found a deck somewhere. It was good to see them having some old school fun. And Lambert knew, just by looking at the get-up of his Red Cross eye-patch son, that his auctioneer persona was doing a running commentary on the game in hand. But Amber was looking impatient, and he didn't want to give her time to start pondering the whereabouts of that stray asteroid. Lacey handed Lambert his drinks and indicated to make a swift getaway if he knew what was good for him. Lambert swiftly took the drinks and was about to make that getaway when the dwarf pulled on the back of his jacket. "Only I know Lawless had lied to me," the dwarf continued his rant. Why?" "Because I heard that he was looking for a midget." "But you are a midget. I mean, dwarf." "A midget dwarf is all the one. None of that political correctness round me. You hear?" Lambert was getting a little impatient and had said it before he really knew what he was saying, making it sound like a threat. But it was true. Anybody here in the Central could see that this individual would blend in beautifully on the set of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. "He felt that I was too tall." He winked as he said this. "He was looking for a smaller individual, which is preposterous. But to give him his due, he had a good eye, because technically I'm not a dwarf." The girl behind the counter was making subtle beheading signs at her juggler by now. Lambert wasn't sure which way to turn. "That shower of monkeys up there in Parliament think the same. They won't give me a grant because I'm 1 centimetre, displaying 1 centimetre with long dirty nails, above the official dwarf assistance grant specifications." He took a gulp of Guinness and slammed his glass on the counter. "I could be ineligible for government aid due to my status." "Stature?" The small individual looked at Lambert. "Exactly. Couldn't have put it better myself. I've got to break my back every day at work because I'm 1 centimetre too tall. 1 centimetre has ruined my life. That bastard Lawless was the same. That 1 centimetre kept me from being a circus star. I'm out there on my own, night and day, climbing all those steps, and me with a crooked coccyx. And you know what's worse? I've got to go to Dublin once a year to see if I fall into the category of dwarf. They turn me down every year, but this year I might get in. I'm old, you see. What happens to old people? They die? No, yes, they get smaller. And I've been measuring myself in the mirror and I think I've shrunk indeedy." Lambert looked at the almost dwarf and wondered if he'd just slipped through a vortex in time and was on the set of The Twilight Zone. At this point, the wedding party came together on the dance floor and formed a conga line to Flight of the Bumblebee and started snaking his way through the pub, legs flying and all raucous laughter. The bride and bridesmaid, at the head of the snaking eel, were grabbing everybody in their midst. Nobody was safe. That's when they picked up the irate, almost dwarf, Blacktooth, and practically crowd-surfed him over their heads and shoved him into the line behind them. Just as they grabbed him, pint in hand, Lambert called out, "So where do you work?" "The Lighthouse," were the last words Lambert heard before Blacktooth disappeared into the conga line. Lambert almost dropped his pint when he heard that Blacktooth was the lighthouse keeper. The song, "I'm Going to Marry a Lighthouse Keeper," sang in his head. What kind of woman would marry the half-dwarf Blacktooth? If he was married, that is. But more than any of that, Lambert was so jealous of the little man. And worse again, the half-dwarf didn't even want to work there. Just as Lambert's head began to fill with impossibilities, he was swept up into the swirling conga line that was running dangerously close to going in over the counter, especially the old folks clinging onto the back of the line as it jackknifed and swung wide out the back, sending elderly and young alike crashing into tables and chairs and spilling alcohol in all directions. Lambert grabbed onto Amber as the conga came around and pulled her in front of him. She hesitated at first, but once she got going, she enjoyed herself. Lambert, behind her, couldn't keep the smile off his face until he burst out in laughter and laughed his head off as the conga went round and round. What was it about dancing that suddenly made him ecstatically happy? But that wasn't enough for Lambert. The conga restricted his body. It was holding him back. He broke free of the conga and took himself to the dance floor, where he executed some brave moves. What had gotten into him? He'd always been a closet dancer, checking out his Michael Jackson moonwalk in the full-length mirror of his bedroom, which Amber thankfully hadn't packed in case of end-of-the-world emergency. Probably because it was 7 years bad luck if she broke it. Not that that was a problem, considering the so-called end-of-the-world asteroid. Lambert's feet took on a life of their own and pranced him around the floor. The conga line began to fall apart and join Lambert in his desperate bid to outdance the world. He danced away the bad news of planet Earth. Meanwhile, sweat stains began to show at Amber's midriff. That's when she decided to stop and enjoy a few more glasses of Heineken and play blackjack with her twin teenagers. Apollo remained in character all night, swapping from an auctioneer auctioning off everything he could see, including the pub, to intermittent ventriloquism. He almost started a fight between two farmers when one farmer apparently heard the other farmer call him a chicken molester. Even Artemis got a kick out of that one. Amber pretended she didn't know her husband once Lambert really cut loose on the dance floor. There was a time when she would have been out there with him, swinging her hips. She wanted to, but she couldn't muster up the courage or strength. She just wanted to enjoy her glass of Heineken. Once upon a time she was so in love with him that she would have joined him for a tango in the sombre grey tax office at River House Building in Limerick City, while the stony-faced civil servants looked on him from behind their little desks, wondering what this strange thing called love was all about. It had to be spontaneous, and once she had to think about dancing with him, well, something had gotten broken along the way. Now she was mortified as Lambert tried out a few of his more exotic moves on the solid oak dance floor of the Central, making him look as if he was suffering an epileptic fit. Golden oldie MC Hammers, You Can't Touch This came from the speakers, but Lambert adapted his impromptu jive dance to MC's beat. Nobody could touch him on the dance floor. The man was possessed by a dancing god. He was having a catharsis. Lambert danced until he had whipped a devil dervish vibe that had the whole bar enraptured. A few ladies wanted a piece of Lambert and joined him in a jitterbug while Amber looked on in mild amusement. He completely forgot about Blacktooth. Two things happened to Lambert in the conga melee that night. Firstly, he discovered his newfound hobby, though he didn't know it yet. Secondly, the lighthouse happened.